I'm on team let the birth rate plummet to hell. And I watch global birth rates because many of these countries implement policies that have them in their find out season right now. And so many of the things that they have done, we as a country are doing currently. So I want to talk about China. China's population falls for a third straight year, posing challenges for its economy. China's population fell last year for the third straight year, its government said Friday, pointing to further demographic challenges for the world's second most populous nation, which is now facing both an aging population and an emerging shortage of working age people, a shortage of people. They're talking about it like there is a shortage of widgets or something. All right. It says China population stood at 1.408 billion at the end of 2024, which is obviously a lot. But there was a decline of 1.39 million from the previous year. So it decreased over a billion. The figures announced by the government in Beijing follows trends worldwide, but especially in East Asia, where Japan, South Korea, Hong Kong, and other nations have seen their birth rates plummet to hell. China, 3 years ago, joined Japan and most of Eastern Europe among other nations whose population is falling. The reasons are, in many cases, similar. Rising costs of living are causing young people to put off or rule out marriage and childbirth while pursuing higher education and careers. While people are living longer, that's not enough to keep up with the rate of new births. The reason why I do these global stories is because many of these things are exactly the same. The reasons why people are not having babies. The cost of living is too high. The wages are not enough. And it's like people are saying, get someone else to do it because it's not worth it. And these countries are not addressing the root causes of why people aren't having babies. They just keep writing all of these articles like, wringing their hands saying, we're getting older and who's going to cover the pensions and who's going to pay for taxes. They don't get to the root of the problems. Countries such as China that allow very little immigration are especially at risk. China has long been among the world's most populous nations, enduring invasions, floods, and other natural disasters to sustain a population that thrived on rice in the south and wheat in the north. Following the end of World War II and the Communist Party's rise to power in 1949, large families reemerged and the population doubled in just 3 decades. Even after tens of millions died in the Great Leap Forward that sought to revolutionize agriculture and industry and the Cultural Revolution that followed a few years later. After the end of the Cultural Revolution and the leader Mao Zedong's death, communist bureaucrats began to worry the country's population was outstripping its ability to feed itself and began implementing a draconian one-child policy. Though it was never law, women had to apply for permission to have a child, and violators could face forced late-term abortions and birth control procedures. Massive fines and the prospect of their child being deprived an identification number, effectively making them non-citizens. Rural China, where the preference for male offspring was especially strong and 2 children were still ostensibly allowed, became the focus of government efforts, with women forced to present evidence that they were menstruating and buildings emblazoned with slogans such as "have fewer children, have better children." So, prop up having boys. So you have a whole generation that has so many more boys than girls. And then, put all of these restrictions on women. Like how would you feel as a woman where people are making sure that you're having your period and watching you like that? That definitely makes you feel less than human. So obviously these women, like, why would you want to bring a girl into a world like this? The government sought to stamp out selective abortion of female children, but with abortions legal and readily available, those operating illicit sonogram machines enjoyed a thriving business. That has been the biggest factor in China's lopsided sex ratio, with as many as millions more boys born for every 100 girls, raising the possibility of social instability among China's army of bachelors. Friday's report gave the sex imbalance as 104.34 men to every 100 women, though independent groups give the imbalance as considerably higher. And even though 104 to 100 doesn't sound like a lot, when you have millions upon millions of people, that is definitely a huge imbalance where there are so many more boys than girls, or I'm sorry, so many more men now than women. More disturbing for the government was the drastically falling birth rate, with China's total population dropping for the first time in decades in 2023, and China being narrowly overtaken by India as the world's most populous nation in the same year. A rapidly aging population, declining workforce, lack of consumer markets, and migration abroad are putting the system under severe pressure. While spending on the military and flashy infrastructure projects continue to rise, China's already frail social security system is teetering, with increasing numbers of Chinese refusing to pay into the underfunded pension system. Already more than a fifth of the population is aged 60 or over, with the official figure given as 310.3 million, or 22% of the total population. By 2035, this number is forecast to exceed 30%, sparking discussions of changes to the official retirement age, which is one of the lowest in the world. With fewer students, some vacant schools and kindergartens are meanwhile being transformed into care facilities for older people. Such developments are giving some credence to the aphorism that China, now the world's second largest economy, but facing major headwinds, will grow old before it grows rich. This part right here, where there are vacant schools and kindergartens, really speaks to the fact that there are more old people than babies being born. There are, like the diaper companies, they're making diapers for old people more than they're making diapers for babies. That's where they are in the world right now. Government inducements, including cash payouts for having up to 3 children and financial help with housing costs, have only had temporary effects. Meanwhile, China continued its transition to an urban society, with 10 million more people moving to cities for an urbanization rate of 67%, up almost a percentage point from the previous year. So now they're like, cool, go have 3 kids. But it's going to be hard to change that mindset of, previous times where they had 1 kid. And, I'm totally sure that they're still propping up boy children. So they have such an imbalance, but they're still only going to want boy children. But the women, they know how women are treated in this society. Are they going to be able to convince women to actually have kids in this country? That's going to be the question that has to be asked. But I don't ever really see them approaching it from the standpoint of what can we do to make women want to have babies in this society. I don't really see them addressing that. Anyways, join the conversation. Let me know what you think about this one. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. This article speaks on the consequences of a super age society that has more elderly than babies that are being born. This says Japan's elderly are lonely and struggling. Some women choose to go to jail instead. The rooms are filled with elderly residents, their hands wrinkled and backs bent. They shuffle slowly down the corridors, some using walkers. Workers help them bathe, eat, walk, and take their medication. But this isn't a nursing home. It's Japan's largest women's prison. The population here reflects the aging society outside and the pervasive problem of loneliness that guards say is so acute for some elderly prisoners that they prefer to stay incarcerated. There are even people who say they will pay 20,000 or 30,000 yen. That's about $130 to $190 a month if they can live here forever, says Takayoshi Shiranaga, an officer at Tochigi Women's Prison located north of Tokyo, during an extremely rare visit granted to CNN in September. Within the prison's light pink walls and strangely serene halls, CNN met Akio, an 81-year-old inmate with short gray hair and hands dotted with age spots. She was serving time for shoplifting food. There are very good people in this prison, Akio, who CNN is identifying by a pseudonym for privacy. Perhaps this life is the most stable for me. The women in Tojiki live behind bars and must work in the prison's factories, but that suits some just fine. Inside, they get regular meals, free health care, and elder care, along with companionship that they lack on the outside. One inmate, Yoko, 51, has been imprisoned on drug charges 5 times over the last 25 years. Each time she returns, the prison population seems to get older, she said. Some people do bad things on purpose and get caught so they can come to prison again if they run out of money, said Yoko, who CNN is identifying by a pseudonym for privacy reasons. Struggling in isolation. Akio knows the burden of isolation and poverty too well. This is her second stint in prison after being previously jailed in her 60s for stealing food. So they are coming to jail so that they have some companionship, they have food, they have health care, and all of that. That is wild to me, but that is life. Like, what else are they doing on the outside? If I had been financially stable and had a comfortable lifestyle, I definitely wouldn't have done it, she said. When she committed her second theft, Akio was living off a very small pension that was only paid every 2 months. With less than $40 left in 2 weeks until her next payment, I made a poor decision and shoplifted, thinking it would be a minor issue, she said. Her prior conviction meant that she was imprisoned. With little family support, Akio had stopped caring about the future or what would happen to her. Her 43-year-old son, who lived with her before she was in prison, often told her, "I wish you'd just go away." This is another thing that having boys does. Typically the caretakers are the girls or the women. But when they have boys, this is probably what happens. He said, "I wish you'd just go away." I felt like I didn't care what happened anymore. I thought there's no point in me living and I just want to die. Theft is by far the most common crime committed by elderly inmates, especially among women. In 2022, more than 80% of elderly female inmates nationwide were in jail for stealing, according to government figures. Some do it for survival. 20% of people aged over 65 in Japan live in poverty, according to the OECD, compared to an average of 14.2% across the organization's 38 member countries. Others do it because they have so little left on the outside. There are people who come here because it's cold or because they're hungry, said Sharanaga, the prison guard. Those who fall ill can get free medical treatment while they are in prison, but once they leave, they have to pay for it themselves. So some people want to stay here as long as possible. Can Japan fill the gap? CNN only passed through one security gate at Tojigi, where 1 in 5 inmates is elderly, and the prison has adjusted its services to account for their age. Across Japan, the number of prisoners aged 65 or older nearly quadrupled from 2003 to 2022, and it's changed the nature of incarceration. Now we have to change their diapers, help them bathe, eat. At this point, it feels more like a nursing home than a prison full of convicted criminals. Part of the problem for former inmates is a lack of support once they re-enter society, says Megumi, a prison guard at Tojigi, who CNN is identifying by her first name only for privacy. Even after they're released and return to normal life, they don't have anybody to look after them. There are also people who have been abandoned by their family after repeatedly committing crimes. They have no place to belong. Authorities have acknowledged the issue, with the welfare ministry saying in 2021 that elderly inmates who received support after leaving prison were far less likely to reoffend than those who didn't. The ministry has since ramped up its early intervention efforts and community support centers to better support vulnerable elderly. The Ministry of Justice has also launched programs for female inmates that provide guidance on independent living, substance addiction recovery, and how to navigate family relationships. The government is now considering proposals to make housing benefits accessible to more elders, with 10 municipalities across Japan already testing initiatives to support elderly people with no close relatives. But it's not clear whether that will be enough in a country with one of the world's longest lifespans and lowest birth rates. The elderly population is ballooning so fast that Japan will require 2.72 million care workers by 2040, according to the government, which is now scrambling to encourage more people to enter the industry and to import foreign workers to fill the gaps. Import foreign workers. That's like importing gas or importing widgets or importing cell phones. That is crazy that you have to import workers. All right, it says that's evident in Tochigi, where officers actively ask inmates with nursing qualifications to provide nursing care for elderly prisoners, Megumi said. They are asking inmates if they have nursing qualifications. That's where they are going with this. This is going to be very interesting to watch. Yoko, the 51-year-old inmate, is one such caregiver, having gotten her qualifications during her last sentence. Now, when there aren't enough prison staff caring for the elderly, she helps other inmates bathe, change their clothes, and move around, she said. All the while, prisons continue filling up with white-haired inmates. Akio finished her sentence in October. Speaking to CNN a month before her release, she said she was full of shame and afraid to face her son. She planned to apologize and ask his forgiveness, but she said, "I'm afraid of how he might perceive me. Being alone is a very difficult thing, and I feel ashamed that I ended up in this situation. I really feel that if I had a stronger will, I could have led a different life, but I'm too old to do anything about it." So this is where I believe that many of these places are going, many of these countries that have no social safety nets or have really aged populations. I can see this type of thing happening in the United States, where some states, some counties, some rural areas have a lot of elderly people and no people being born, no babies being born. So these countries, these states, they're going to have to confront their aged population where the birth rate is plummeting. But I don't really see them, really tackling it. I see them talking about it, but I don't really see them getting to the root of the issue. And there's going to be a lot of fallout, a lot of consequences. The whole bringing in foreign workers, many of these countries, like the Asian countries, are very nationalistic and xenophobic. But if they're going to bring in some people, I wonder how that's going to work out, considering that they are pretty xenophobic in these countries. Anyways, I thought that was interesting. Join the conversation. Let me know what you think. Don't forget to like, comment, and share.